The goblet that broke the silence. Myra had learned the Night Palace rules the hard way. Do not speak unless spoken to, do not look up at the thrones, and never make a sound when the Queen Mother is drinking. The palace was a living cave of luxury, all black marble that swallowed footsteps and chandeliers that glittered like frozen lightning. The guests were not guests. They were nobles of the blood, pale and perfect, laughing softly as if laughter cost them nothing. Myra carried a silver tray with 6 crystal goblets, each filled with dark wine that smelled like roses and iron. She kept her eyes down, but she could still feel him, King Darius, at the far end of the hall. Everyone felt him. He sat on a throne of obsidian with a calm face and a violent stillness, like a storm pretending to be a statue. Rumor said he had ruled since London was mud and smoke, yet his suit looked freshly pressed, his hair neat, his mouth bored. Beside him, on a smaller throne, sat the Queen Mother, Lady Seraphine, wrapped in pearls and black lace, her hands gloved and her posture perfect. People called her soft because she smiled. Myra, watching from the edge of her vision, knew better. Her smile had teeth in it, just hidden. Tonight's banquet was meant to be polite, a peace dinner between rival houses. The kind of night where everyone pretended they were civil, while their bodyguards counted exits. Myra hated these nights because one wrong step could turn her into a stain. She hated them more because she kept noticing the same thing. The Queen Mother always watched the servants, not the nobles, like she was searching for something in the wrong place. Myra placed the first goblet at the left side of the table, then the second, then the third. Her wrists ached from scrubbing stone floors in the kitchen all morning. She had blisters that had reopened, and she had wrapped them with thin cloth so the blood would not drip. In the palace, a single drop of human blood could start a fight or a feast. She reached the head table and lowered the last goblet in front of the Queen Mother. Seraphine's eyes flicked to Myra's hands. Not a glance, a measurement. Myra's stomach tightened. She bowed as she was taught and started to step back. That was when it happened. The Queen Mother moved, quick as a blink, and her wrist slipped. The goblet tipped, the dark wine poured out, and the crystal shattered on the floor with a sharp, ringing crack. The sound cut through the hall like a slap. All conversation died. Even the candles seemed to hold their breath. Every noble turned toward the throne, waiting to see who would be punished for the mistake. Myra froze because everyone would assume it was hers. She was already imagining the guards dragging her away, already tasting fear in the back of her throat. Then the Queen Mother spoke, soft and sweet as if she had dropped a spoon, not shattered silence. "Oh dear," she said, and her voice made the room colder. "One must be careful, mustn't one?" She did not look at Myra. She looked at the puddle of wine, at the shards, at the way the red-black liquid spread like a stain. Then she tapped one finger against the armrest of her throne, 3 slow taps, and held her hand still, palm facing down. It was a tiny gesture, nothing dramatic. But Myra felt it because Myra had grown up with a mother who spoke without speaking. Her nan used to teach her little signals on the bus, a warning, a promise, a lie. Myra's eyes widened just a fraction. Those taps were not random, they were a pattern. Seraphine's ring, a heavy band with an old crest, pressed against the velvet as she moved her fingers again. Tap, pause, tap, tap, pause, drag. A coded signing. A silent language. Myra's skin prickled. Across the table, King Darius lifted his gaze finally, and for the first time that night his calm looked forced. He stared at his mother's hand like he wanted to stop it, like he had stopped it 100 times before. His jaw flexed once. The nobles did not understand. They only saw a Queen Mother making a mess. That was the clever part. Seraphine had shattered the goblet on purpose to trigger protocol. Silence, attention, obedience. Now every eye was on the throne, and every ear was listening, and no one would notice the message being sent in plain sight. Myra's breathing went shallow. She should look away. She should pick up the shards and apologize and let the night swallow her. But curiosity is a dangerous disease, and in Myra it had always been terminal. She dropped to her knees, as the servants were required to do after any royal spill, and she began to gather the crystal pieces with shaking fingers. Her head was bowed, but her mind was translating. Tap, pause, tap, tap, pause, drag. She ran the pattern against the memory of her nan's old silent code, the one used by dock workers to warn each other when police were coming, the one used by women to pass news when men were listening. It clicked in her head like a lock turning. Assassination tonight. Myra nearly cut herself on a shard. Her pulse thudded so loud she was sure the vampires could hear it. She risked one glance upward. Seraphine's face was still composed, her smile polite, but her eyes had moved straight to Myra. And in that look there was no pity. There was command. Like, you understood, like, good. King Darius stood slow, controlled, and the whole hall flinched. Even the proud nobles lowered their chins, pretending they were not afraid. "We will take a short recess," Darius announced, voice smooth, London slick, as if he was hosting a charity ball. "Mother requires a moment." He offered his hand to Seraphine, not as a son, but as a jailer escorting a prisoner. Seraphine took it with a smile that did not reach her eyes. As they rose, Myra saw something else, something that made her stomach drop further. A thin line of silver chain around Seraphine's wrist, hidden under lace, linking into the throne itself. A restraint. A queen mother on a leash. Nobody else reacted. Nobody else saw it, or they pretended not to. Myra's fingers went numb around the last shard. So the whispers were wrong. Darius was not protecting his mother in luxury. He was keeping her contained. The nobles began to stand and drift into smaller groups, murmuring, sipping, smiling, pretending the spill was just a silly moment. Servants rushed in with cloths and new goblets. Myra stayed low, finishing her task because that is how you survive. You act like you belong to the floor. But inside her head the words kept repeating, assassination tonight. Who was meant to die? And why was the Queen Mother telling a random waitress? A shadow fell over her. She looked up and met the eyes of Lord Varick, the king's chancellor, a thin vampire with a polite face and a cruel interest. His smile was gentle, like a doctor about to lie. "Girl," he said quietly, "you picked up the broken glass. How brave." Myra's throat tightened. "It's my duty, sir," she whispered. Varick crouched, close enough that she smelled cold mint and old blood. His gaze dropped to her neck where her uniform collar had shifted. Something glinted there just for a second, a tiny locket on a chain, cheap metal, nothing special, except Varick's pupils widened, just a flicker. Then he smiled wider. "Oh," he murmured, and the word sounded pleased. "So you're here." Before Myra could ask what he meant, his hand settled on her shoulder, not hard, but final, like a stamp. "The king requests you," he said, still polite. "Now." Myra wanted to run, but the palace was built for catching people who run. She rose on shaking legs, and as she did, her locket slid free again. On its face was a worn symbol, a crown over a thorned circle. Myra had always thought it was just an old trinket from a charity shop. Varick's eyes stayed on it like it was a key. The guard stepped closer, silent. In the distance, King Darius and the Queen Mother vanished through a side door into the private corridors where no servant was meant to go. Myra's mouth went dry. If Seraphine was warning of an assassination and Varick had just noticed her locket, then this wasn't about some random palace drama. This was about her. About why she had been hired so quickly last week, no questions asked. About why the Queen Mother had been watching the servants. Varick guided her forward, and as Myra walked, she realized the entire hall had shifted around her, like a net tightening. At the far end, a black door opened without a handle and darkness breathed out. Varick leaned in and whispered almost kindly, "Do not lie to the king, love. He hates surprises." Myra swallowed, because if the Queen Mother's code was right, surprises were exactly what the palace was about to drown in. The corridor beyond the black door was colder than the banquet hall, and that was saying something. The air smelled of stone dust and old perfume, like history left too long in a drawer. Myra tried to keep her breathing normal, but she could feel her heartbeat shouting inside her ribs. She expected Varick to lead her to a punishment room, the sort servants whispered about, the place where screams were swallowed by velvet walls. Instead, he led her up a spiral stair that was not on any palace map, past portraits with eyes that seemed to follow, past windows painted black on the inside so no moonlight could betray movement. At the top, a single guard opened a double door without knocking. Myra stepped into a smaller chamber lit by one lamp. No gold, no chandeliers, just a round table, 2 chairs, and a wall covered with iron hooks. King Darius stood by the table alone. His jacket was off, his sleeves rolled neatly, like a man about to wash his hands after a job. He did not sit. He watched Myra enter as if he had been waiting for her, not for Varric. Varric bowed and slipped out, the door sealing with a soft click that sounded like a lock deciding. Darius spoke without greeting. "Show me," Myra blinked. My lord," his gaze flicked to her throat. "The locket." Myra's fingers shook as she pulled it out. The chain felt suddenly heavy. She held the cheap little piece of metal in her palm and wished it was anything else. Darius crossed the room with that unnatural glide, stopping close enough that Myra felt the cold radiating off him. He did not touch her skin. He touched the locket with one fingertip. The symbol caught the lamplight. Crown. Thorned circle, tiny marks around the edge that Myra had never noticed. Darius's face stayed calm, but something in his eyes shifted like a door opening a crack. Recognition, annoyance, fear maybe buried deep. "Where did you get this?" he asked. "Charity shop in Brixton," Myra said, because the truth was stupid and the stupid truth was all she had. £5. The old lady said it was family junk. For a second Darius's mouth twitched, almost a laugh, but it died before it was born. "Brixton," he repeated like the word had teeth. He placed the locket flat on the table and turned it gently. Underneath there was a scratch pattern that looked like damage. Darius traced it with his nail. "This is not damage," he said quietly. "This is a seal," Myra swallowed. "A seal for what?" Darius looked up and his voice became softer, which was worse. "For you," Myra's stomach dipped. "I'm just staff, sir. I pour drinks." "You pour drinks," he agreed, "and my mother just used you as a messenger in a room full of killers. You are either very lucky or you are exactly where you were meant to be." His eyes narrowed. "Did you understand her tapping?" Myra's tongue stuck to the roof of her mouth. If she said yes, she might die. If she said no, he might test her until she broke. She chose the truth because lies in a vampire palace were like perfume on blood, easy to smell. "Yes," she admitted. She said, she warned. "Assassination tonight," Darius finished for her, flat and precise. Myra felt her knees go weak. He knew. He had known the whole time. That meant the danger was not news, it was routine. "Then why did she do it?" Myra blurted and immediately regretted it. Darius's gaze cut sharp. "Because she cannot speak." Myra stared. "She just spoke at the table." "She spoke harmless words," Darius said. "She cannot speak truth in public. She is bound by court law and by my orders." Myra remembered the silver chain. You chained her." Silence stretched. Darius did not deny it. He just stepped away as if distance could keep the topic from bleeding. "You think I am cruel," he said, and it sounded like he was bored of being thought cruel. "You think I am a villain in her story." Myra's throat tightened. "Aren't you?" For the first time, Darius's calm cracked, not into rage, into something tired. "If I let her walk free, she dies," he said. "If I let her speak free, she dies. If I let her send warnings to the wrong ears, thousands die with her." Myra shook her head, confused. "Why would your own court kill her? She's the queen mother." "Because she remembers," Darius said, "and memory is treason in this palace." Darius turned, eyes flat. "They're coming for the queen mother," he said, and the palace lights began to die. Myra realized her locket was a key. Now. The woman behind the chains. The lights did not go out all at once. They dimmed in sections, like the palace was blinking slowly, deciding what it was willing to reveal. Myra stood frozen as the last word Darius had spoken settled in her chest. "They're coming for the queen mother. Not rumors, not paranoia. A schedule. The kind of danger that wears suits and smiles and arrives with paperwork." Darius moved with sudden efficiency, crossing the room and pressing his palm to the bare stone wall. Symbols flared briefly, dull red, then vanished. Somewhere far below, metal slammed into place. The palace was sealing itself. "You stay here," he said, already turning away. Myra's voice broke through her fear before her sense caught up. "No," Darius stopped. Slowly, he turned back, and the look he gave her was not anger. It was assessment, like she had just stepped out of the role he had assigned her. "You do not have clearance," he said. "I have the message," Myra replied, heart pounding. "And the seal." She held up the locket, feeling it hum faintly, like it was awake now. "She didn't choose me by accident." Darius's jaw tightened. "You don't understand what you're walking into." "I understand enough," Myra said. "You locked her up to keep her alive. You locked the truth away with her, and now they're coming to kill the truth." Silence stretched. Somewhere in the palace, boots ran. Orders were shouted and swallowed by stone. Darius exhaled, slow and controlled. "Follow," he he said, and that single word changed everything. They moved through passages Myra had never seen, corridors too narrow for ceremony, too bare for comfort. This was the palace beneath the palace, where power went when it didn't want to be seen. The air grew colder, thicker, carrying a scent like old ink and iron. Darius stopped before a door carved with symbols that made Myra's head ache if she stared too long. He pressed his thumb into a groove. The door recognized him. It opened with a sigh. Inside, Lady Seraphine sat alone. No throne, no audience, just a high-backed chair bolted to the floor and the silver chain Myra had glimpsed before, now fully visible, looping from her wrist into the stone. She looked smaller here, stripped of spectacle, but her eyes were sharp as ever. They went straight to Myra. "You came," Seraphine said, voice light. "Good girl," Darius stiffened. "Mother." "Don't use that tone with me," Seraphine replied sweetly. "It makes you sound like you still think you're in control." Myra's stomach twisted. This was not a victim waiting to be saved. This was a woman waiting for the right moment. Seraphine leaned forward, chain clinking softly. "Did you see how they listened tonight?" she asked Myra. "How eager they were to pretend nothing mattered." Myra nodded. "I understood your code." Seraphine smiled, satisfied. "I knew you would. You have the old pattern in your bones." Darius cut in sharply. "Enough. They are mobilizing." "This is not the time for games." Seraphine's smile faded. "This is the only time that matters," she said. Her gaze flicked to the door, then back to Myra. "They will kill me tonight, quietly, respectfully, a stroke, a poison, a tragic end for a woman who remembered too much." Myra's chest tightened. "Then let's get you out," Seraphine laughed, a real laugh, short and sharp. "Oh no," she said. "If I leave this room, I die faster." Myra frowned. Darius looked away. "Then what do you want?" Myra asked. Seraphine's eyes burned. "A voice," she said, "because mine was taken." She looked pointedly at the chain. "And because my son thinks cages are kinder than graves." Darius's control cracked for a second. "Everything I did to protect you," he said. Seraphine's voice went cold. "You didn't protect me, you preserved me, like a relic you were too afraid to break or use." She turned to Myra. "Do you know why he kept me alive?" Myra shook her head. "Because if I die naturally," Seraphine said, "every law I signed unravels, every lie I locked into place comes loose. The court wants me dead in a way that looks harmless. Darius wants me alive in a way that looks cruel." Myra felt dizzy. "And me?" Seraphine smiled again, softer now. "You are the crack." Darius stepped forward. "You are not using her," he warned. "I already have," Seraphine replied. "Years ago, the moment she put that locket on." Myra's hand flew to her chest. "What do you mean?" Seraphine leaned back, chain taut. "That locket is not jewelry, it is proof, a witness mark. It opens what I sealed." The walls hummed, reacting. Darius's eyes darkened. "You swore you destroyed the witnesses." "I destroyed the obvious ones," Seraphine said. "The brave ones. The loud ones. This one survived because she was invisible." She looked at Myra with something like pride. "Sound familiar?" Myra's head spun. "Witness to what?" Darius answered before Seraphine could. "To the first purge," he said quietly. "The night the court rewrote itself in blood." The word purge hit Myra like a punch. "You were there," Seraphine said to Myra. "Not as you are now, but your blood was, and the palace remembers blood." The lights flickered harder. Somewhere close, a lock failed. Seraphine's smile sharpened. "They're here," she said calmly, "and now you have to choose whose silence matters more." The chain rattled as she lifted her bound wrist. "Unlock me," she told Myra, "or let them erase the last voice that knows how this kingdom really began." Darius stepped between them. "If you do this," he said to Myra, "there is no undoing it." Myra looked at the chain, at the locket, at the woman who had shattered a goblet to whisper truth into a room full of monsters. Her hand stopped shaking. The palace shuddered as footsteps thundered closer. The lock on the outer door screamed. Myra stepped forward. End rehook. If Myra unlocks the Queen Mother's chain, the palace itself will turn against the king. The palace turns its face. Myra's fingers brushed the chain before Darius could stop her, and the moment skin met silver, the palace reacted like a living thing waking from a long lie. The floor thrumming low and angry, the walls tightening as if listening, the locket at her chest burning hot enough to steal her breath, and Lady Seraphine's smile fading not into fear but into focus, sharp and ready. because this was the moment she had been waiting for, the second the silence cracked. The outer door exploded inward with controlled force. Not chaos, not panic, but precision. Boots hitting stone in perfect rhythm, black coats, silver clasps, faces calm in the way only executioners ever are. And at their center walked Chancellor Vale, hands folded, expression respectful, like a man attending a funeral he had arranged weeks ago. "Your Majesty," Vale said smoothly, "I's never leaving Seraphine. This is most unfortunate." Darius moved instantly, power flaring, shadows bending to him like trained beasts, but the palace did not obey the way it usually did. Its response delayed, distorted like it was choosing sides, and Myra felt it then, deep and undeniable, the truth settling into her bones. This place was not Darius's anymore, not fully. Seraphine laughed softly. "You're late," she said. "I warned you the old seals were thinning." Vale inclined his head. "Which is why we're here to relieve you of the burden." His gaze flicked to Myra, calculating, and remove the contamination. Darius stepped forward, voice low and lethal. "She is under my protection." Vale smiled, thin and polite. "Everything here exists under the law, my king, including you." The word king sounded ceremonial, hollow. Myra's chest tightened as she realized how carefully the trap had been laid, how the Queen Mother's imprisonment had never been hidden rebellion but tolerated decay, allowed because it served everyone's interests, including Darius's, until now. Seraphine leaned toward Myra, chain scraping. "Listen to me," she murmured, urgency cutting through the calm. "If they touch me, the witness dies with me. If they touch you, the palace will seal itself forever. They cannot allow either." Myra swallowed. "What do I do?" Seraphine's eyes gleamed. "You speak." The soldiers advanced, slow, measured, weapons angled not at Darius but at Myra, because power always knows where the real threat stands, and Darius felt it too, the shift, the moment he was no longer the axis of control. "Stand down," he commanded, but the words slid off them like rain. Vale raised a hand. "We only need one thing," he said calmly. "The locket." Myra stepped back, heart racing. The memory of every ignored order, every broken plate, every silent look from the Queen Mother snapping into clarity, and without thinking she spoke, her voice carrying in a way it never had before, resonant, layered, as if the walls themselves were lending her weight. "I am witness," she said, the words tearing free from somewhere older than language, and the palace answered. Sigils burned into the stone, ancient marks flaring alive, not Darius's symbols, not the court, but something deeper, older, a law written before crowns, and the soldiers froze, weapons trembling as the air thickened around them. Vale's composure cracked for the first time. "Impossible," he whispered. Seraphine's chain snapped taut as the floor beneath her chair split, revealing runes buried for centuries. "You erased the records," she said, voice ringing. "Not the blood." Myra's vision blurred as images flooded her mind. A hall filled with screams, a child pressed against stone, a woman's hand closing around a locket, a promise whispered into fear, and she understood then that her life had never been random, her suffering never meaningless. It had been calibration, pressure applied slowly until the right voice emerged. Darius stared at Myra, horror and awe colliding. "All this time," he said hoarsely, "you weren't hiding her from them." Seraphine finished it for him. "I was hiding them from her." The palace groaned, rejecting the intruders, corridors sealing, exits collapsing, and Vale shouted orders too late, because the law had shifted and the old throne no longer recognized him. Seraphine's chain fell away, clattering uselessly, and she stood, tall despite the years, despite the cage, power rolling off her not as magic but as certainty. She took Myra's hands. "Now you know," she said softly, "and now they will try to kill you for it." Alarms wailed, deeper this time, not warning but mourning, and Darius felt the weight of centuries settle on his shoulders as the palace chose its witness over its king. End rehook. As the palace locks down, Darius realizes the Queen Mother was never the prisoner. The king was. The king without a crown. The palace did not calm after choosing Myra. It grew sharper, colder, like a blade freshly drawn. Corridors sealing with grinding finality as ancient mechanisms woke from centuries of sleep. And Darius stood in the center of it, all feeling something he had not felt since the night he took the throne: helplessness. because power was moving around him now instead of through him. The soldiers who had come to execute now found themselves trapped between walls that pulsed with old light, their weapons useless, their orders meaningless, and Chancellor Vale backed away slowly, his eyes never leaving Myra, calculation replacing confidence as he finally understood the scale of his mistake. Witnesses were wiped out, he said tightly. Every last one. Seraphine stepped forward, posture straight despite the years of restraint, her voice steady with bitter satisfaction. You wiped out the voices, she replied. Not the listeners. Myra's legs trembled, not from fear but from overload, the palace whispering fragments into her mind, laws layered beneath laws, truths hidden inside etiquette and silence. And she realized the voice she had just used was not shouting but remembering, repeating something the stones themselves had been waiting to hear. Darius turned to her slowly, searching her face as if seeing her for the first time, and in that look was guilt so heavy it almost bowed him. You were never meant to stand here, he said quietly. I thought keeping you invisible was mercy. Myra met his gaze, anger rising sharp and clean. You watched me suffer, she said. You let it happen. The words hit harder than any blade because they were true, and Darius did not deny them. I did, he admitted. Because every time someone tried to protect one of you openly, they died within days. I chose the slow pain over the fast execution. Seraphine's laugh was soft but cutting. And in doing so, she said, you became exactly what they wanted, a king who mistakes control for protection. Vale seized the moment, voice urgent. This is pointless, he snapped. The council will never accept her. Witness or not, she threatens the balance. You know what happens when balance shifts? Darius's jaw tightened. I know, he said, because I have been holding it still with my hands for centuries. The palace lights dimmed, then flared, and Myra gasped as a surge of images flooded her again. Not memories this time, but possibilities, futures branching like veins of light, some soaked in blood, some in silence, some in fire. And she understood the real weight of what she was, not a weapon, not a queen, but a fulcrum. The balance did not break because of her. It broke because it had been frozen too long. They will come, Darius said, more to himself than anyone. Not just soldiers, not just councils, every house that profits from the old order. Myra nodded, the fear settling into resolve. Then hiding me won't work anymore, she said. Seraphine placed a hand on her shoulder, grounding steady. That was never the endgame, she said. It was preparation. Vale laughed bitterly. You think you can walk out of this alive, he demanded. You think the city will accept a witness after centuries of silence? Myra looked at him, and for the first time her voice carried calm authority instead of reaction. They already live under the consequences of your silence, she said. They just don't know it yet. The palace shuddered as distant explosions echoed, outer wards collapsing under coordinated attack, and Darius felt the old instincts rise, the king, the warrior, the monster they feared. He stepped closer to Myra. If you leave this place, he said, I cannot shield you anymore. Myra met his eyes without flinching. I don't want a shield, she replied. I want the truth to survive. Seraphine smiled, pride flickering across her lined face. Then it's time, she said, turning toward a sealed archway now glowing faintly, for the city to hear what it buried. The archway cracked open, revealing a passage none of them had seen before, descending into light and sound. And as alarms screamed and the first true battle for the palace began, Myra stepped forward, knowing that once she crossed that threshold, there would be no return to invisibility, no safety in silence, only consequence. Endry hook as the hidden passage opens. Myra must choose whether to speak to the city and start a war, or stay silent and let the old order survive. The city that was never meant to hear. The passage pulled Myra downward into a chamber that breathed like a living thing. Walls carved with names scratched, burned, and clawed into stone over centuries. Names of people who had spoken once and vanished forever, and the weight of it pressed into her chest until breathing felt like rebellion. Above them the palace shook as wards failed and steel met steel. But down here there was no sound of battle, only a deep hum like a held breath, and Seraphine slowed, fingers brushing the carvings with reverence. This is where voices were buried, she said softly. Not killed, contained. Darius followed last, already bleeding from a shallow cut at his temple, the cost of holding back an entire city catching up to him. Yet his eyes never left Myra, not with command now but with fear, because for the first time he did not control what came next. At the center of the chamber stood a circular dais, its surface smooth and dark, marked with the same sigil that had once burned under Myra's skin in the marketplace. And as she stepped closer, the hum rose, recognizing her, welcoming her. "Once you speak," Darius warned, voice rough, "there is no quiet undo." Myra placed her hand on the stone and felt the city beyond the palace, felt hunger, anger, exhaustion, lives bent under rules no one remembered agreeing to, and she understood that silence had not kept them safe, it had only kept them obedient. "They deserve to know why," she said, and the moment her palm pressed flat, the chamber answered. Sound rushed outward not as noise but as understanding, threading through tunnels older than the throne, rising into streets and homes and taverns, into the bones of the city itself. And people paused mid-step as truth slid into place like a puzzle piece finally found. They saw punishments disguised as order, disappearances masked as accidents, a king praised for restraint while holding the leash tight, and above it all, a queen mother whose madness had never been madness at all, but warning after warning delivered in a language no one had wanted to remember. In the palace, soldiers faltered as certainty cracked, blades lowering as whispers spread faster than commands, and Chancellor Vale screamed for control that no longer answered him. Darius felt it too, the city shifting under his feet, and for the first time in centuries the throne felt light, almost hollow. He moved toward the dais, toward Myra, but Seraphine stepped between them. "You cannot stop this," she said, "not without becoming their executioner again." Darius stopped, shoulders sagging under the truth he had avoided, that his rule had been built on fear dressed as patience, that hiding Myra had not been an act of love but of habit. "I never wanted to be their jailer," he said quietly. Myra looked back at him, not cruel, not kind, just clear. "Then don't be," she replied. The chamber flared as the last seal broke, and the city above roared, not in violence but in awakening, questions spilling into the streets, nobles barricading doors as citizens demanded answers, and the old order began to crumble not with fire but with voices too many to silence. Endry Hook, as the city awakens and the throne weakens, Darius must decide whether to fight for control, or step aside and face what he's done. The truth that could not be locked away. The city did not burn that night, even though many expected it to, and that alone felt like a miracle carved out of tension and restraint, because revolutions usually arrive screaming, not thinking. Myra stood at the edge of the palace balcony as dawn broke for the first time without enforced curfew, watching people gather in the square below, not with torches but with questions, voices rising unevenly, unsure but alive. Darius stood behind her, no guards at his side now, no crown on his head, just a tall figure learning how heavy freedom could feel when it was no longer denied to others. "They will not forgive easily," he said quietly. Myra did not turn. "They shouldn't," she replied. "Neither should I." Seraphine joined them slowly, age finally visible in the slope of her shoulders, the fight draining now that the warning had been heard. "The council has scattered," she said. "Some fled, some are hiding. Some are begging to negotiate." Darius closed his eyes briefly. "And the city? The city is listening," Seraphine answered. "That is more dangerous than rage." Bells rang in the distance, not alarm bells this time, but the old signal used only when assemblies were called, a sound many had never heard before, and Myra felt something settle inside her, not triumph, not revenge, but responsibility. She had not been chosen to rule, she realized, but to remember, to stand where silence had been forced and refuse to shrink. Darius stepped beside her at last, not looming, not commanding. "I won't stop them," he said. "If they choose to end my reign, I will not fight it." Myra looked at him then, really looked, and saw not a monster, not a savior, but a man who had ruled by fear of loss for too long. "That is not mercy," she said. "That is avoidance." He accepted the rebuke without defense. "Then tell me," he asked, "what do you want?" Myra breathed in the cool morning air, the city's breath mixing with hers, and answered honestly. I want the truth written where it cannot be hidden again. I want witnesses trained, not buried. I want children taught the old signs so no one ever mistakes warning for madness." Seraphine smiled faintly. "Then the role is clear," she said. "Not queen, not prisoner, voice." The crowd below shifted as Myra stepped forward into view, murmurs rippling outward when they recognized her, the girl from the marketplace, the invisible one who had become unavoidable. She did not shout. She did not threaten. She spoke plainly, telling them what had been done in their name, how silence had been used like a weapon, how protection had been twisted into control, and how fear had been inherited like law. And they listened, some with anger, some with grief, some with relief sharp enough to ache. When she finished, there was no cheer, no chant, only a deep collective stillness as understanding took root. Daria stepped back deliberately, leaving her alone at the front, and for the first time since the throne was built, the palace did not feel like a cage, but a place being redefined. As the sun climbed higher, Myra felt the mark at her throat fade to a faint scar, no longer a lock, no longer a target, just a reminder of what silence had cost. She did not know what the city would become, or whether peace would last, but she knew one thing with absolute clarity: she had not been saved. She had been shaped to survive long enough to change everything. Final line: she was never hidden to be forgotten. She was hidden until the truth was strong enough to stand. Call to action if you enjoyed this dark vampire drama with twisted power and hidden truth. Make sure to like the video, subscribe to Vampireverse, and turn on notifications so you never miss a story where monsters aren't always the villains. Do you think Darius was right to hide her to keep her alive? Yes or no?